This is Andi Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by STN Sports Chief Athlete Advisor Paul Reddy for the first time.
Bit of a mouthful, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's supposed to be me who's asking you how you're doing. How's life for you, Paul?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. How's the jet lag?
Jet lag's actually settled in now, thankfully, after the second day. How about yourself? How are you finding settling
it's good.
in?
I mean, we had quite a long journey, didn't we? I mean, I looked over at you. You'd been up quite late watching Asia, hadn't you? And you looked exhausted. I thought I was a bit worried about whether you were actually alive at one point because you were sort of catching flies. But yeah, it was a long old flight, wasn't it? We had that changed at Atlanta. So no, glad to be here.
We certainly are. Thankfully, we are here in San Antonio, Texas, for one of the biggest fights of the year. Canelo taking on a man who you work with in Callum-Smith. But before we come on to all of that good stuff, as we mentioned, you're obviously the Chief Athlete Advisor for STN Sports, a new management company, if that's the right wording. Or
Yes, so we're a sports agency starting in boxing. We're going to grow into other areas, other disciplines, digital and media. That's sort of plans for the future. But boxing is the primary focus at the moment.
So we will come on to kind of your work with Callum amongst other boxers that we know you've teamed up with in a little while. But just take me back to kind of your origins in the sport, Paul. I know you from Matchroom, but before then, how did you get into sport? Is this your first time with Boxing Social?
Yeah, so I was working in IT. First daughter was born, and I remember, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I remember just looking at her thinking, I'm a bit bored of just doing. No disrespect to anyone that works in offices, but I just felt that wasn't for me. So I felt I needed to go and do something that ignited a bit of a passion. I've always been passionate about boxing, growing up around it, watching the sport. So it just an opportunity presented itself. I started a boxing blog probably about 7 or 8 years ago, which I was just doing reviews and stuff on the sport, and quite quickly managed to get some interviews. Darren Barker, big up Darren Barker, one of the first people I interviewed, and then just close links with Tony Simmons' gym, John Ryder, and a lot of the guys down there. And then off the back of that, got on Matchroom's media list, met Eddie, interviewed Barry, and then kind of hit it off from there. So there was an opportunity presented itself from Matchroom for doing social media. So I started off doing their social media for 2 years. And then John Wishausen, who was Barry, and then Eddie's sort of long-standing matchmaker for a while. He worked with Eubank Senior sort of in the 90s when boxing was in its pomp. And John left, and then they just approached me and said, look, is it something we think you could do? Because quite often sort of John and Eddie would be talking about fights in the office, and I'd chip in for my 2 pence worth just for a couple of suggestions, and sometimes they sort of probably thought, fuck off, but other times they kind of took it. So yeah, it was a natural progression. Done that for 3 years, so I got a matchmaker's license. One of the first fights done was Joshua Klitschko, so obviously doing the undercard alongside Eddie, which was quite surreal. You're in there, you got the Tali Klitschko, mean looking guy, and I'm picking his brother's gloves up and he's sort of snarling at me, and you're a bit like, shit, is this guy gonna eat my face or something? And then just the Rio Olympians all turned over. So Boatsi, Cordina, Katie Taylor, probably from 2 or 3 fights I matched all the way through. When she got to world level, Eddie sort of took over and done that. Conor Ben's probably someone that I've worked very closely with Tony, and we guided him up until I left Feb this year. So very proud of the work we've done with Conor and the progression he's made there. So yeah, it's been cool.
Talked about obviously the decision behind then obviously moving on from Matchroom and moving into STN Sports, and the decision behind setting that up.
Yeah, so for me, I've always, as I kind of got a bit further down the line on the matchmaking, I was always keen to manage boxers, because you'd see it on the other side just from speaking to the teams and stuff, and with the career map, and I really enjoyed that, like with Conor and Akoli, Cordina, some of the other guys there sitting down and saying, right, these are the fights I think you should have in 6 months. I'd like you to fight this person in 12 months. What do you think? And we were always kind of on the same page, but I always thought I could do a lot with fighters that I was managing and looking after. So with the British Boxing Board, after you've had a matchmaker's license for 3 years, or any professional license, you're applicable to get a manager's license. So in my head, I decided towards the end of last year that I wanted to go and manage fighters. For me, I don't think you can work for a promoter and manage fighters. I know that does go on, just personal opinion. I think to be completely subjective, you need to be outside of that, that remit to do what's best for your fighter. So Sean O'Toole, big up Sean, business partner, sports lawyer who I've known for many years, part of Team Smith, and we got talking, and just our kind of positions aligned. So yeah, I just took the decision. We had an opportunity to set up STN. I mean, it was just a company, and we come up with the name STN, second to none, which I thought was quite cool. And it's gone down quite well. I think the branding and everything looks looks decent, and the reception's been great. So yeah, working for myself now, like I say, sort of chief athlete advisor. It's a bit of a mouthful and sounds a little bit American type thing, but I have got a professional boxing manager's license. I will be managing fighters. That's something that's very important to me to have that. So yeah, no, exciting for the future.
Exciting for the future, but with that in mind, does it bring a newfound sense of pressure, being with Matchroom, having a different type of role, to setting up on your own, effectively going into the world on your own now? Do you feel a different sense of pressure to kind of pick things up very quickly?
Yeah, of course. And I think, look, as a father of two, you've got to provide. I've got missus at home and stuff, so you've got external pressures as well as boxing. But I've always had confidence in my ability that I know the sport, understand fighters, and I'd like to think I'm a decent person, someone that's got a good reputation in the industry. And just from actually turning around and saying that, oh look, I'm leaving Matchroom, I've probably had 2 or 3 people that were on the GB team at the minute contacting me saying, mate, I'd really like to have a conversation with you. And at the time, they were looking to turn pro last year, but COVID hit. So yeah, it's just that, and then it's given me an opportunity as well to really sort of network and get to know the GB guys. I mean, I know Rob and the guys up there, they're really well. So yeah, I think we're in a strong position to grab some of the top talent when they turn professional in the summer. So yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Talk to me about that, because obviously moving into a field now, we've seen SJAM Boxing recently set up and certainly started to make more headlines in the last couple of years. MTK are continuing to impress everybody on the management front. What differentiates yourselves with STN compared to those two alone amongst a variety of other companies? Yeah,
look, I think there's some brilliant management companies there. I think Sam's doing well, MTK are doing brilliant. They've been doing great for a while. But I think from my perspective, no disrespect to those guys, but I've worked for a promoter for 3 years. I've matched some of the top talents, people that are now world champions. So I understand the sport. I understand the kind of the crux of that. Financially as well, in terms of what fighters should be paid based on profile, ability, what somebody should get for a British title fight, European title fight. I know that. Debutants, I know exactly the value of the fighter, and if I'm working for you, then having me in your team is going to be invaluable, because I'll know exactly your value and ensure that you're getting the best money possible.
Moving forwards and onto some of the fighters you work with, as we are in Texas, let's get into it. Canelo-Smith, as we mentioned, one of the biggest fights of the year. Talk about the initial conversation with Callum about trying to team up with him, and obviously a successful one at that, as we are here, and you're with him now.
Yeah, so I think with Callum it was quite an easy transition, because Callum's worked with Sean, so Sean's looked after Callum's legal perspective. Callum went self-managed last year, so while I was at Matchroom, I assisted him with that, because I knew that I was going to go through the process myself. So we work for Callum. Callum is the boss. He calls the shots. I mean, he's a softly spoken guy, but he doesn't take any shit. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. But we've always got on very well on a personal level, Callum. I get on very well with the family. And look, I know, we know our position in the team. We're purely here to make life as easy as possible for Callum. But yeah, sort of from a negotiations perspective, Sean and Callum led the conversations with Eddie. I was in the background supporting those guys, maybe underplaying sort of importance there, that the path that I played, but those guys were kind of integral to getting the deal done. But yeah, I definitely supported them and played a part in the background.
Talk about the deal for the Canelo fight. How kind of easy or hard or difficult was it to get it over the line? Because it was a fight which you could name probably 10 fighters who were all at one point in the frame to face Canelo.
Yeah, I think there was Caleb Plant. I think the first thing was there was a bit of uncertainty whether he's going to go with PBC. Is he going to fight Caleb Plant? Is he going to go just freestyle and fight either Billy Joe or Callum? Can't speak for Billy Joe or Caleb Plant, so I'm not particularly close to their teams. But Callum's always wanted this fight. He's always fancied this fight. He feels that he can beat Canelo. I mean, that's, and the confidence of him this week is, I've never seen it. I was in Jeddah with him for the week, but there's just a different level of confidence with him for this fight. This is a career-defining fight, and I think this is his moment to announce himself to the world fully. Not just people in the UK know him, but I think in America as well, people are going to really know exactly who Callum Smith is on Saturday night.
From kind of a fighting perspective, how are you anticipating it in your own mind to play out, Paul?
I think it's going to be, look, these big fights, there's always an element of caginess to start with. I think that they're both going to have a look at each other. I think Canelo is going to respect Callum's size. I know he's boxed Kovalev, who was at a higher weight, but Callum is in the peak of his powers, hitting very hard, very strong, very intelligent boxer. judges the distance well. He's so accurate, Callum. So I think there will be a lot of respect there from Canelo. From Callum's perspective, he doesn't hold any fear against Canelo. I think many people go in the ring and they've lost the fight, maybe psychologically, but you're not going to get that with Callum. He's, in America they have a term, in a bit of a basketball fan, called clutch mentality. So under pressure situations, and Callum is what I would call a clutch fighter. I think when he is in this environment, you're going to see the very best of him, because he's going to go in there, he's going to focus on himself, and let's see how it goes on Saturday. It's going to be brilliant.
It's uncertain times around the world, Paul, but with Callum, he hasn't been able to bring out a big camp effectively. He's got his brothers out, he's got Joe, he's got you, he's got Sean. The list goes on for those who I haven't named. How kind of key do you feel that will be for Callum as the week progresses to kind of create somewhat of a homely environment for him? Yeah,
we are a close-knit team. You've got, big shout to Johnny Reynolds, who does his S&C, of course, who's from your area, Scott Robinson on the nutrition, one of the best people in the industry. So it's the same team from Jeddah. I've just kind of stepped over the line into the team alongside the guys. But yeah, it's a very close team. Once everyone got out of quarantine, we were watching Callum train last night, and just seeing him hit the pads and just the energy, everyone together. It's there's a really good sort of close-knit group there. But I think for Callum, he's boxed in Jeddah. Some of his best performances have been overseas, so he doesn't feel pressure. If he's in a boxing ring, sounds a bit cliche, Callum just turns up and does his best.
Now, one thing which was a talking point in the build-up to the fight is whether there was or wasn't a rehydration clause. It's been publicised there isn't. Talk to me about that from your perspective, Paul. What was kind of a deciding factor in not seeing one put in? Because I think many people expected to see Canelo certainly, if not ask for one, then maybe pressure for one.
Yeah, I think people make a big deal out of the clauses and stuff. I mean, it's can't really comment too much on that. I mean, I think it's just one of those things that it's not in there. So is that an advantage for Callum? Is it an advantage for Canelo? We will see on Saturday night.
Move forward. There is that rematch clause, though. What can you tell us about that? Provided Callum comes away successful, is it kind of something where we have to see it back over in the US? Can Callum say no on it in the UK? Do you know what you can share with us on that?
I think it will be, it's going to be, there's certainly a rematch if there's a demand, if the fight is what people expect, and when Callum's successful, then certainly there will be a demand for a rematch. But look, he'll be calling the shots. Then even though he's the champion, he will be the victor of this fight. He will. You could argue that he will then be one of the biggest names in boxing after beating the biggest name in boxing. So yeah, I think there will be demand for that fight. And again, not one to look too far ahead. I think we've just got to focus on Saturday, get that win. But it would be amazing to bring that back to Anfield. I think Anfield would be absolutely rocking that new cop. Could you imagine Canelo walking out there and getting booed? And yeah, it'd be very special. But let's focus on Saturday, and then we'll take it from there.
Moving forward, once again, then Paul, just get your thoughts on some of the other fighters that you're working with. Start off with somebody I know very well, Cal. Your fight. Talk to me about that link up.
Yeah. So look, Cal and I have been, when I was at Matchroom, we were very, very close, good friends. Known Cal for many, many years. Brilliant fighter. Close with the family. Gamal and Galal well as well. But yeah, I think from my perspective, Cal. He just felt that after the Chocolatito fight, he needed to make a couple of changes, and I'm sure there'll be a time for him to kind of come out and discuss that. But he is going to move up to bantamweight, and I think he'll do very well there. But yeah, incredibly talented guy. I'd like to see Cal box sort of spring next year at bantamweight against a decent level opponent, not go straight into a world title fight. I'd like him to have a big domestic fight. I know the Charlie Edwards fight has been sort of mooted and spoke about. I've got a lot of time for Charlie's a nice guy, but you've got the promotional politics now because he is with Queensberry and Frank Warren. That's not anything for us to deal with. That's whether something could be resolved. But another option, Paul Butler possibly. I've sort of half joked with Joe this week about that. So yeah, look, that could be a decent fight, but I'd like him to experience that, a big domestic fight, because yourself, it's just got a really different feel to it, hasn't it, than greatest respect boxing a South American who can't really speak a lot of English. I think it will just ignite a different flame in Cal, and you'll see a really good performance.
At bantamweight, you obviously have Noya Nua, who is the king, or seen as the king of that division, rather. Sorry, excuse me. He's seen as the king of that division. What is Cal's plans looking towards the world scene, and how far off do you feel he will be once he adjusts to bantamweight? Yeah,
I think, look, being realistic, Inoue is a very difficult opponent for anyone, and I think I'd imagine he's going to move up to super bantam at some point, and I think the timing could be perfect for that with Cal. If Cal has 2 fights, and then say the third fight is for a world title, so I'll say second fight, maybe a domestic, and then fight someone else. At that time, Inoue will probably go up to super bantam, and then the belts will become available. So Cal will be ranked very highly, I'm sure, across the board. So yeah, he'll be in a very strong position afterwards. But I just think, I don't. Cal will fight anyone. He's got no problem with that. But I want to see him have a comeback fight, test himself at the weight, and then have a domestic fight, and then we can possibly look at having a world title fight after that.
Another active fighter you are working with, Dalton Smith. Talked about the plan with Dalton. There's a lot of excitement around him, and he had a very impressive performance at Fight Camp back in August.
Yeah, no, Dalton's a very, very talented fighter, and he's been sparring Luke Campbell recently, and yeah, I think he's gained a lot from that. But Dalton isn't far away from, I think, sort of challenging, probably maybe sort of fringe British level, because again, it's with the pandemic, people have taken steps up, and rightly so, just because there's no small hall scene, and the promoters need to ensure that the cards are competitive, but equally people being active and taking the right fight. So yeah, I think the likes of Sean Dodd, certainly someone like that would be a great fight over the next 12 months for Dalton. But I think certainly he will be picking up domestic titles. He will be picking up an international type title, and I'd like to see him challenge for the British towards the end of next year. But yeah, he's a problem for anyone in that division. I don't think many people will be queuing up to fight him. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what he can do.
And a man who's also out here who you work with in Anthony Crolla,
yes.
Talks about $1 Million Crolla's involvement with STN.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a... Crolla, I think, is more... So we work with Crolla on the commercial side a bit, so we kind of half joked. He'd done a photo shoot last week, and he was like, bro, what would I call you? And I was like, talent man? I don't know. I mean, that's one for people to determine. But yeah, Crolla's someone who I think from outside the ring, look, he's, from like a punditry perspective, I know he's worked for Sky, but I'd like to see him do more of that. I've had, there's a couple of sort of apparel brands that have been in touch, and he's done a shoot the other week, and he's kind of building his own stable. So it's not a guarantee that his fighters are going to become second to none STM fighters, but certainly would be there to support him. I would consider him. There's one fighter in particular that we're looking to sign that's going to hopefully qualify and go to the Olympics. And I've already had a conversation with Andi, like, if we get this individual, would you be interested in training? He was like, mate, 1,000,000%. And I've spoke to said fighter about Anthony as well. So he's someone who, he's been Joe's second for a number of years. He had an incredible professional career. He'll be in Callum's corner at the weekend. He was in Callum's corner before. He's done many corners, very experienced coach, great guy. And yeah, just someone who I think that he's needed a bit of support on some of his sort of commercial activities and bits and pieces as well. So, and look, he's a great role model. He set his gym up himself recently. So yeah, he's very easy to work with.
Building towards the future and 2021, Paul, map out the year for me. What's kind of the ambitions of yourself and STN?
So we've got kind of primary focus, and just digressing slightly back to the question you asked earlier, I think what's going to separate us is I don't want to work with or manage 10 or 12 fighters. Probably between 5 to 7 is my optimum, because I want to be able to go and see them regularly. I want to see them train. I want to look after their commercial activities. I want to do absolutely everything to get them a promotional deal, of course. So for me, it's continuing. We're in advanced discussions with a number of the GB team. So some have qualified, some haven't. They need to ensure that they qualify in April. So the qualifiers are in London. You're going to come down for that?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. You'll be there, I'm sure. So yeah, just focusing on those guys, supporting them, and then once they've qualified, we'll be having serious discussions with them. And then I'd like to be in a position where hopefully I can get over to Tokyo, but we don't know what the world's going to look like. I mean, we've managed to get here, so fingers crossed. And then hopefully sort of August, September time, we're in a position to go and speak to promoters and, I'm sure I'll sort of discreetly have a chat with Eddie over this weekend if we get time, just hint about a couple that we're kind of looking at. And yeah, I'd hopefully be in a position where all of them have made their professional debut towards the end of this year, so that'd be, really exciting.
You mentioned having a discreet conversation with Eddie. Do you feel that all that maybe your Matchroom links may be a hindrance if there was ever a fighter you work with who signed up with Frank Warren or another promoter, for example?
No, I don't think so, because I think that Eddie understands, the business. He's been in it much longer than me. But there's going to be fighters that perhaps he doesn't have space for, perhaps he's not interested in, which is his prerogative. I've got to do what's best for the fighter. I can't just assume and be comfortable with thinking, right, just because I work with Matchroom and I know the team there, I know the guys there, they're going to do me favours. That I'm realistic. I know that we are setting out from scratch, and rightly so. We'll be treated as the same as other management companies. So yeah, I wouldn't be doing my fighter justice if I just solely was like, right, let's go to Matchroom. Look, Matchroom are putting on the best shows and stuff, and BT's digital content is very good. Top Rank are doing good shows as well. There is options out there. So yeah, look, we've got to talk to everybody. We've got to do what's best for the fighter, and Matchroom and the other promoters have got to do what's best for them. And hopefully, if the two meet and we can align and work together, then great.
Whilst I've got you, Paul, I just want to touch on a fight which has taken place this past weekend. A man you said you've worked with previously in Anthony Joshua, overcoming Joshua-Pulev with a 9th round stoppage victory. Your thoughts on his win, Paul?
Yeah, no, I thought Anthony looked sharp and good. I did predict I thought he might stop him in the 4th, and then when in the 3rd round I was like, oh, he's going to get him out. I didn't have a bet. I'm not really a massive gambler, but yeah, I just thought it was going to be a performance that enabled Anthony just to take out a bit of frustration after the 12 months. And look, I'd imagine he'd want to have boxed in front of a bigger crowd, and it was quite fitting that the most popular fighter, one of the biggest names in the world, was able to to have the first crowds back, and the atmosphere seemed electric on TV. I don't know what you thought about it, but no, I thought he boxed well. He took his time. He didn't rush in and go gung ho. There was no kind of even when he hurt Pulev, he was still very tactile with his kind of attacks and his approach. So no, I think you can just. Every time he fights, you see he's just developed, and he's such a well-rounded fighter. I mean, he can clearly punch, but he can box, he can move. He's intelligent. He sets traps as well. So no, I think he looked really good.
I'm sure during your time with Matchroom, Paul, you'd have had one-to-one time with Anthony. You'd have got to know him a little bit on a personal side. One thing that people picked up on was after the fight, in his post-fight interview, he never quite seemed to kind of call out Tyson Fury as much as what people anticipated. Was it a surprise to you, especially considering maybe the relationship you previously had with him and the one-to-one time you would have had, or do you think differently of it?
No, I think that Anthony's his own man, and he's never one to kind of call other people out. Look, he'll fight who the public demand, and the public want to fight Fury. He wants to fight Fury. There's no question about that. Look, I know, I speak to Rob McCracken quite often, and it's not even. I don't even need to ask him. Oh, does he want the fight? Anthony didn't want to kind of. It was his night. It was about him. So he didn't want to stand there and be like try and not necessarily make it about Tyson, but he's going to get asked that question. But he's like, hang on, I've just won, so let me just enjoy this moment, and then the conversations I'm sure will take place. But like everyone, I want to see that fight. I think it'd be brilliant.
Well, Paul, we will leave that there now. But before I let you go, I'm going to leave a final word to yourself for all of your new fans that will be tuning in. STN Sports, just talk to everybody about what to expect ahead of the coming year.
I wouldn't quite say fans. Probably my mum will watch this, but big up, mum. No, I think, look, we're new management company. So new management company to most people, but in the industry, people know who we are. They kind of know what we're about. We are, we want to work with the best people and the best fighters, so that's important to me. I've got to be able to get on and click with the people there. I think if you don't believe me and I don't believe in you, doesn't matter how good you are, there's no point in doing it. So yeah, look, I think we're gonna produce some exciting content. We're gonna work with some exciting fighters. I'm really excited for people to get to know the fighters that we're going to work with as well. And yeah, I think we're here to stay. We're going to make some serious waves. So tune in and keep watching.
Paul, it's been a pleasure to speak to you for the first time. I'm sure it will not be the last. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
Mate, pleasure. And I won't name the other outlet, but I know there was a bit of a right. Did you win that table tennis game? Is that why we're talking first?
Unfortunately, I did not, but it was. Yes, I did not, but I beat Anthony Crolla. So
you beat Crolla. Okay, cool, nice one.
So I'm bringing the smoke, but yes, I appreciate your time today, mate. I'll catch up with you later in the week. Thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
No problem. Take care, man.